Hello and welcome to the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports, entertainment, and sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. We don't like wasting time here, so let's jump right into the news and notes. We're taking a closer look at the biggest news of the week. This week, we're starting with the NFL Draft. Arizona Cardinals selected Oklahoma quarterback Kyler Murray first overall this year. He was the betting favorite to go number one, became the first player to be selected in the first round of both the NFL and MLB drafts. Next year's NFL Draft, already something you can bet on, whether that's the team that will select first overall or what player ends up being taken at number one. Rick, let's start with the player expected to go number one, almost a year out. Who do you like, and why is it Bama's Tua Tagovailoa?
Well, you know, Tua has been a stud quarterback for Alabama, and they're like the 33rd NFL team. You know, they're constantly playing for championships. So, and he makes that offense go, you know, and they have complementary running backs and stuff, but usually it's the quarterback play and then a strong defense and obviously great coaching. But, you know, for me, I'm not picking Tua to be the number one next year. I'm going with my boy from the Pac-12 from Oregon, Justin Herbert, and here's why. He's got just as strong of an arm, if not stronger. He's the prototypical size quarterback at 6'6", 240. He had a great season last year with 29 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a little over 3,100 passing yards. He's coming on strong. He plays in an offense where it's just up and down the field, spread offense. They try and score a lot of points at Oregon. They're not going to be a power run team like Alabama can be at times. Now, don't get me wrong, Tua's a stud. He's a great quarterback. He's going to get a lot of points in Alabama. He's going to have a lot of stats. But I like Justin Herbert. I think NFL scouts and I think NFL teams are going to look at him and say, it's too hard to pass up on a quarterback this size. You know, but we're talking a year out. Anything can happen in a year from now in terms of who's going to be the number one player taken. I remember a couple years ago they had Nick Bosa was supposed to be the number one player taken in the draft this year. What ended up happening? He went number 2, so they were close. But Kyler Murray came on strong throughout the season. He ends up becoming, you know, although I don't agree with Arizona, he ends up becoming the number one pick. I think Justin Herbert can have something like that as long as he has a good season, which I think he and Oregon will. They'll be fighting for the Pac-12 title. And who knows? He could be a Heisman Trophy contender as well. That's my pick. Pac-12, baby.
Yeah, I was going to say Herbert, too, just because for the most part, NFL teams seem to talk themselves into the bigger, stronger arm type quarterback. You know, Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield are kind of exceptions to that over the last couple of years. But for the most part, you see guys like Bortles and Jake Locker and guys that physically look the part, typically getting the nod over the smaller quarterback. And Tua's had injury problems a little bit. He's smaller. I think he's listed at 6'1". He looks even smaller than that on the field.
Yeah, he does.
You know, you don't have to be a huge quarterback to succeed, as we've seen with Russell Wilson and Baker and possibly Kyler Murray. But, you know, it's a year out. Like you said, teams can talk themselves into defense as well. It's all dependent on who gets the pick. You know, if Miami gets it, are they going to take Tua or Justin Herbert just after getting Josh Rosen on draft day the other day? So, you know, it's a little too early to be betting on this. It's pretty ridiculous, but I get it.
I would have waited too.
Yeah, I would say Justin Herbert's the safer pick than Tua, but, you know, there's nothing we can really tell until we know which team has the pick.
That's true. ESPN's Todd McShay does, as of like this morning, does still think the Dolphins would pick first and would take Tua, which I find weird because, I mean, I grew up in South Florida. I grew up a Dolphins fan. And yeah, I know it's been very sad for me for a long time, but drafting a quarterback in the first round doesn't really tend to happen. I mean, they've done it with Ryan Tannehill and Dan Marino. And to have a guy who went number 10 last year that you traded a second-round pick to get this year and to go with a number one, that's, you know, very quick to give, you know, to basically move on and try to do that again. It's a lot to give up to get 2 players from the same position when you need so much else. The guy that McShay, by the way, had at number 2 on his big board is Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver. So if you're looking at any of those teams, which we're going to get into in a moment, that have their quarterback already and they want a weapon to go with him, that would be a decent option for him. A wide receiver going first is a bit of a stretch, I think, at this point.
When was the last time that happened?
It's been years, and I don't know. You'd probably have to go further back to find a time where it happened, where it worked out. Because, you can go early for a wide receiver and have it work, but to go number one it would be crazy. I would think defense, like you guys were saying, is probably a bigger option. You guys did point out the 6'6" quarterback being available with Herbert, but and obviously we just had a 5'10" quarterback go in the first overall this year. So we shall see. And the next aspect of the draft is basically picking which team you think will be the worst in the NFL this year. My bookie has the Miami Dolphins at plus 250. The Arizona Cardinals, New York Giants are each at plus 300. Raiders, Washington Redskins, each at plus 400. And like we were talking about, the team that ends up with the top pick can change what player ends up being selected at number one. For example, Josh Rosen with the Dolphins, Kyler Murray with the Cardinals, Daniel Jones with the Giants, and Dwayne Haskins with the Redskins. So 4 of those 5 teams already have a quarterback on their rosters drafted in the first round at some point in the last 2 drafts. So who do we see as being the worst team in the NFL and having to make that decision of going with another quarterback, picking somebody who is not one of the favorites to go number one so far, or trading that pick? Taylor, we can start with you this time.
I mean, I get Miami being the odds-on favorite, but them being in the AFC East kind of makes me think that they have an easier path to garbage wins than some of these other teams, like the Giants, for example, who play in a much tougher division on paper. By the way, the last wide receiver taken number one was Keyshawn in 1996. So that worked out pretty well, I guess, but it's been a while.
Yeah,
get him the ball.
I don't think you can ever really bet against the Raiders being the worst team in the NFL. They always have that in them. John Gruden didn't really look like a guy that knows what he's doing anymore last season. Derek Carr, I'm not sold on him really being the franchise quarterback that we thought he might be. So the Raiders at plus 400, I believe, is pretty good value. The Giants as well, plus 300. Their quarterback situation is probably going to be a disaster. So I'm not fully on the Dolphins here, but Raiders plus 400, Giants plus 300 looks pretty good.
It sounds like it's going to be a dogfight for this worst record in the NFL next season. I will tell you this. I do not think the Giants will have the worst record, and I'll tell you why. Because of my man, Saquon Barkley. He's going beast mode this year. He's going to get them at least a couple wins. Their defense is going to be a little bit better. I don't see them being as terrible. I don't see them having the worst record. They'll be competing for one of the worst records, but I don't see them having the worst one. I also don't see the Raiders. When you add Antonio Brown to an offense, it's going to open up the entire field. Then you draft a playmaker like Jacobs from Alabama. They're most likely going to bring back Doug Martin because Crowell just got hurt. They're going to have a solid running game. They're improving other areas on the team. I don't see them having the worst record either. Miami. So for me, it's between Miami and Washington. I hate the Dolphins. So I'm picking the Dolphins. Well, but honestly, though, Washington, even though they have a rookie quarterback, they have a great defense. They're going to have AP back. Juice will be back from his injury last year. So they'll have a strong running game. All they need is a capable quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over much. I'm not sold on Rosen. I don't even think he's going to be the starter if they still have Fitzmagic on the roster. Didn't they sign Fitzpatrick this offseason?
Yep.
Yes. So I'm not even saying Rosen's going to beat him out. With that said, if the Dolphins end up with the number one pick and they take another quarterback, I'm going to celebrate and laugh my butt off because that's what that franchise gets. I don't like them. I'm picking the Dolphins to have the worst record. The Bills are going to be improved. The Jets are going to be improved. The Patriots are going to be good. The Dolphins will be lucky if they win one game in the AFC East this year, and if they do, it'll be probably against the Patriots because they're the only team that tends to be able to beat New England each season.
What about Cincinnati? Cincinnati seems like a team that could also kind of challenge for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they can.
I gotta, before I give you an answer, I gotta ask what I mean, Rick, we've been getting along here, but is it because I made you talk like golf a couple weeks in a row? Like, what do you got against? I grew up down there. By the way, if they go quarterback again after what they put me through with not taking Drew Brees in the first round and picking like a corner they were hoping to be their nickel DB in 01 in that draft, and they pick a number 1 overall pick, you finally get it, and you go with a position you just filled in with 2 guys the year before, like you'd be celebrating. And for the first time, the Dolphins picking a first-round quarterback, I'd be crying.
Hey, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. Enough said.
Sorry. Yeah, I along the lines of what you guys were saying, though, the thing that goes for the Dolphins not being the number 1 is because they play in the AFC East. It's because they get 2 with the Jets, they get 2 with the Bills, and they tend to be, at least in the game in Miami, they tend to be a bit of a coin flip against the Patriots because, I mean, they beat them last year. The last image of Rob Gronkowski playing a football game in South Florida was him diving and missing a tackle, on a little bit of a walk-off. So it would be interesting. It wouldn't shock me if in the year where the top of the class projects to be a quarterback would be the year the Dolphins get it when they don't need a quarterback. I do think Rosen becomes the starter by the time the Dolphins have played 7 to 9 games of the year, because I think that if they're sitting at 3-6 or 2-7, why are you still playing Fitzpatrick?
What are you gaining? What are you gaining from playing him at all? Like, you traded for Rosen, you got a first-year head coach.
He's Fitzmagic.
I think that what you gain from it is you allow Rosen to be eased in because you have a bad team and you don't want to destroy the first-round quarterback you've had on your roster in 20 years. I mean, that's the reason I would see, is that you're basically just waiting and letting him know everything and kind of get an idea of what to expect, because you just don't want, you want him to stay hungry, obviously, because dude's got a chip on his shoulder after being drafted 10th overall a year ago and then being traded because the team got the first overall pick. And by the way, that's a really good a summation of it. If the Dolphins do pick first, you don't want to emulate the Arizona Cardinals when it comes to like teams to try to be like necessarily. They've been to a Super Bowl much more recently than the Dolphins have, but having the 10th overall pick in last year's draft and then going and picking a quarterback again first. I think that I do think it might be the Giants. I think that they are I think that when you're talking about being in a division with the Eagles and the Cowboys, that it's very possible that they or the Redskins would be in that situation. I think that the Giants might be a bit more of a mess. Whereas I think that the Redskins have been very consistent in their badness. I think the Giants have been on the downslope of that roller coaster, and I don't know if they've bottomed yet. And I think that is where you've got, you have a situation where a year ago Giants fans were calling to bench Eli, then the Giants bench Eli, and everybody's in an uproar, so they bring him back. I think that they're basically in a position where I don't know if they have been able to truly bottom out yet. And I think
let me ask you this question: out of Washington, Miami, and the Giants, which team has the best player? Period.
The Giants.
Exactly.
Probably the Giants, yeah.
That's going to give them more wins right there. And he's not just like a player that doesn't touch the ball much. He gets at least 20 touches a game, and he's probably going to get more this year. They don't have Odell. But even with Odell, he was still getting plenty of touches. I'm sorry, man. It's the Dolphins.
It's fair. Like I said, hey, the Dolphins get the first overall pick. Hopefully they just don't, do what they always do and waste it.
They're taking an offensive lineman.
You know what? If it helped, fine.
Taking a punter.
Yeah, they'll go tight end. They'll pull like the Jets in the 90s and get a high first-round pick and go tight end.
Kyle Brady.
Oh, man. But anyway, enough of my misery when it comes to being a Dolphins fan since 1994. It's time for Where's Your Money Going, where it's all about what we're most excited about in the coming days. Being a Dolphins fan is not exciting in the slightest bit. Taylor, we're going to start with you. What are you most excited about as far as events go in the coming days?
So this is a futures bet. It'll take a while to pay off, just a few weeks. we do a series on the side called Betting on the Iron Throne. It's about Game of Thrones. You should check it out.
Oh, you better not spoil anything.
I'm thinking, so they have odds on who rules Westeros at the end of the season. Jon Snow's the favorite, as you would expect. You have a Cersei, though, here at plus 2,500. Cersei Lannister, the main villain left in the show. Plus 2,500 is just too low for her. She's sitting on the Iron Throne right now. I think she's been a step ahead of everyone else for pretty much the entire series. So I don't see why she would be that low. Plus 2,500 is pretty good value. It would make a lot of people mad, understandably, but I could see a path to her finishing the season as the ruler of Westeros. So I don't see why you wouldn't just take a flyer on that at plus 2,500. So that's where my money would be going.
And she's hot. She's hot. I'd bet on her just because she's hot. But no, I mean, she's a talented actress, to say the least. Anyhow.
That's safe.
And she's hot. So my money's going to UFC Fight Night this weekend out of Canada. They're going up to Canada. What's that all about? I think there are several fights on the undercard that offer some good betting value. And the main event itself, one of my favorite fighters, the Cowboy, Cerrone's taking on Raging Al. And it's going to be a great fight, actually. And my money's going to go towards that event because I think you have at least 4 to 6 fights that offer good betting value, close odds. And we're not even talking like, clear-cut favorites that should win. We're talking pretty close fights. They're going to be competitive. And I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a good card on Saturday.
And to plug another series we do this week in combat sports, so you can see a breakdown of all of those cards. And we're going to get a little bit into that stuff later on in the podcast as well. And I would agree with Taylor because I love doing that. I'm a little bit behind on the series at this point. So I trust your advice on that because it does sound, I'm basically trying to take the spoilers out of it when I do get to that point. But
you need that Men in Black flash thing. Just
seriously.
This last episode was the greatest episode in the history of the entire show, like by far.
Yeah.
People can argue and say something else. No. People are trying to tell me the Red Wedding. 5 minutes of the Red Wedding episode was good. Then they try and say the Battle of the Bastards. 15 minutes of that was good. You had over an hour of an entire battle that you waited 8, 9, 10 years to see. And it had a great payoff. No, greatest episode ever to this series. Don't get me started. And Cersei's still hot.
Well, I mean, as far as if we ever have a debate on the greatest episode, maybe if we do that as like a wrap-up kind of thing for the series, then we might have to have Rick come in to help us out to give it an opinion on that. But the UFC card this weekend's interesting to me. I really do like that headline fight too, and we're going to get into that in just a bit. But yeah, if I was fully caught up on the show, I would definitely be going because listening to Taylor talking about it, it sounds really intriguing, that bet on Game of Thrones. But because I'm not fully caught up, I'd have to say the UFC card this weekend.
You should hold your head in shame.
That was a good edit point. So we can move on. By the way, I am only one episode and 7 full seasons behind. So.
Oh my God!
You're on your way.
I'm on my way. I have started.
You kind of have to pace yourself. It's like an hour-long show, and there's a lot going on. There are a lot of characters to try and identify, and the names are weird.
Let's get into spread and butter. It's a closer look at some of the weekend's biggest games and the betting spread on them. We're going to get into the NBA. We begin with the Friday night games. The Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics split the first 2 games of the series in Milwaukee, with the Bucks bouncing back to win Game 2. Game 3 shifts to Boston. Boston favored to win this one. Line currently at 2 points, +2, -107 for Milwaukee, -2 at -113 for Boston. Not much in the way of a spread to cover for Boston, so it's essentially down to picking a winner here. Which side are you going with, Taylor?
So this was looking bad for me. I was pretty hard into the Bucks in this series overall. I was trashing the Celtics last week, and then they went out and got stomped in Game 1 at home. But they bounced back with Game 2, which was basically a must-win. the road team that splits the first two games and then comes home generally has a pretty good advantage. Boston, I think they might have an advantage on the coaching side, which matters in the playoffs, obviously. And the talent's there. They just underperformed all year. So I'm more into the Celtics than I was a week ago at this time, as much as I loathe them. But, game 3 at home, I think Boston covering that spread is pretty reasonable, 2-point spread. So I would just side with the home team there.
I seem to remember last week, there was one fella, one handsome young lad.
You're taking a victory lap on a 1-1 series, by the way.
Hey, one handsome young rugged lad who sat here and said that he just does not trust Milwaukee, that Boston's a better team. They have more experience. What did Boston do? They went in and smacked Milwaukee right in the mouth in game 1 and blew them out on the road. They took off game 2. Now they come back home for game 3. Irving and Horford will have another big game like they did in game 1. That'll be the difference. And Boston will win again, and Boston's going to win this series, and Boston's going to the NBA Finals. That's my prediction. Sticking with it.
When you were saying the young, handsome, rugged young man, were you referring to me? Because I think I picked Milwaukee last week when we were talking.
Never.
I still think the Bucks are a good team, and I think it's going to be. I think that they'll take that. I really do think Milwaukee ends up taking one of the two in Boston. I think just to kind of even it back, it'll be 2-2 going back to game 5. Whether or not Boston wins the series or not, I am now questioning more than I was sitting here a week ago. But I think that Boston, a 2-point line, if you can get the home team basically to win, and at -113, which the money line on Boston, just if you're betting straight up, is -130. I don't know why you would take that. The only way you lose this bet is if they win by 1. I say that and, fast forward and anyway. But, yeah, I would pick the Celtics for game 3. I think that they'd want to have that strong bounce back after game 2. They get the perk of playing at home. So I think Boston wins game 3. The 2 points doesn't frighten me because you only have to be afraid of them winning by 1. Because it's a push if it's 2, and if it's 3 or more, which is, basic home court advantage math would say a 3-point win at home is probably a good starting point. So, I'd take Boston. I don't, and the 2 points is totally fine by me. Let's go to the Western Conference for Friday. Denver, Portland moving to Oregon for game 3. Nuggets won game 1, lost game 2 in Denver. The spread set at 4 for Friday's contest. Blazers, the favorites, pay out on either side of this line, -110. So, Rick, where's your money going here?
I said at the beginning or last week or the week prior, I don't even remember now, but I was picking Portland. I'm rolling with Portland still. They got to take one game on the road. They returned home. And, yes, Denver didn't shoot well last in game 2, but Lillard didn't score many points at all in game 2. He had a poor game. Coming back home where Portland plays better, better defense, better offense, better shooting, score more points. I think they're going to win this game, and I think they're going to cover the spread. I was actually hoping it would be a little bit lower, but when you look at the scores for the first 2 games, it seems like both teams were able to win by a comfortable margin. Not as big of blowouts like the Boston series. But I think Portland's going to come back home and they're going to win by at least 4 points.
Yeah, Denver's kind of a mediocre road team. They always have that home court advantage because they play at altitude. But they're 21 and 23 playoffs included on the road this season, which is obviously pretty mediocre. And Portland has a good home court advantage, just like Denver does. I think Portland coming back home, after getting the 1-1 split in Denver, should be feeling pretty good, especially like you said with Lillard playing poorly last night. If they can still win a game and their best player is not very good, that's not a good sign for Denver long term. But Portland by 4 seems reasonable. I think I would side with Rick and take Portland to cover.
I'm just going to make it universal. I mean, this was Portland's home record is, I think it's a game or 2 off, just at least from the regular season, versus what Denver's was. And Denver's was the best in the NBA. But they're not, as far as being a road team goes, they're not quite the same on the road as they are when they're playing in Colorado. So, yeah, I'd go with Portland. I think that the Blazers I think I picked them to win the series. And you win one in Denver, if you win at home, it's kind of that similar thing to what we were just talking about with Boston and Milwaukee is if you are the lower seed, you just have to win one road game. And then if you do your job at home, you've won the series. And I think that this is a case where it might be that one win in Denver could mean it ends in 6. And that Portland could win games 3 and 4 and then win game 6 to close it out. But that's getting a little bit ahead. I would say that for game 3, I would agree with you guys, make it unanimous. The Blazers, I don't mind the 4-point spread. That works for me as well. So nice to have some agreement here for the panel. Let's go to Saturday. We're going to stay out west. Golden State, Houston series shifting to Texas. Warriors won both games in Oakland, but the Rockets are actually favored by 3.5 points on the spread for this game. Again, both teams at -110. So which side are you taking here, Taylor?
I'm from Houston. I am a lifelong Rockets fan, but it's been pretty discouraging to see these first 2 games. Game 1 was decided basically by the referees, or so the players thought. Game 2 was better to watch. There was less flopping, less yelling going on. But anytime you can get Golden State as an underdog, it's hard not to take that. This is the best team we've seen in the NBA maybe ever. So anytime you can get them as an underdog, you kind of have to like that. The Rockets have to win this game, obviously. If they don't, they're dead. They might be dead anyway. But I'm leaning toward the Rockets just because if they win a game, it has to be this one. But I won't fault you if you feel like you have to take Golden State there on the road, even, as 3.5-point underdogs.
I told you guys, I hate to have to say I told you so again, but I specifically
Yeah,
I specifically
seem pretty happy about it.
First of all, I want to rewind about a minute when Drew was saying, it's nice to have some agreement here. Well, that's because you guys are agreeing with me. That's why it's nice. Second of all, when it comes to this series, I specifically said, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Woo! And the Rockets are not the man. Golden State is the man. And Houston, for whatever reason, they built this team to take on Golden State. But until they can actually beat Golden State in a series, in the playoffs, I'm not going to take them. And even for this game, well, first of all, let me go back to what Taylor said. You've got a series where you have some of the most recognizable players in the entire sport, especially for this brand of the NBA. And all we hear is screaming and crying and popping and whining. This, if I was allowed to swear on this show, this game is full of a bunch of –
Hey, now.
It's become such a crybaby game that it makes me sick to watch at times. And this series is epitomizing it, which is a shame because you got so much talent on the floor. And you got so many superstars that kids and college players and high school players look up to. And yet all they're doing is complaining and flopping and whining and crying. For this game, you have to go with Houston at home to win and to cover the spread, or the series is over. Houston is fighting for their playoff lives right here. Not only that, they played well last year at home against Golden State, and during the regular season, they played well at home against Golden State. Even a blind James Harden will be able to lead Houston to enough points to where they should cover this spread at home. So I'm taking Houston. It's hard for me to say that because I don't really like them, because I don't really like anything from Houston.
Ouch.
Anyhow.
AstroTurf, these are some great things. I do agree with you guys that if Houston doesn't win this game, it's done. It's either going to end in 4 or it's going to end in 5. And even if they do win this game, it may still just end in game 5. The spread isn't what concerns me as far as whether I'd pick Houston or Golden State, because if I think Houston's going to win, giving up 3.5 points is fine, because if they're going to win, they should win. What really strikes me, though, is that you've got the team that has won back-to-back NBA championships, 3 out of the last 4, that is 2-0 in this series. Yeah, they lost to the Clippers twice in the first round, so it's not that they're indestructible or anything to that extent. But you've got Golden State plus a cushion at minus 110. I don't think I'd take that bet. What I would do, though, is the Warriors on the money line are plus 145. Houston, I think, is probably, like we said, if they do not win game 3, absolutely zero chance whatsoever. It's a minimal one at this point that they come back to win the series down 2-0. They still could. But if they don't win game 3, it's completely over. The bet, though, that intrigues me is not Houston giving up 3.5 points to get minus 110 when they haven't beaten Golden State yet. When Golden State has looked like they are still the man, as Rick said. What intrigues me is the Warriors at plus 145. Like that is, if I'm doing this, I'm either taking with you guys and saying Houston's going to win and they're going to cover. Or what I'd probably rather do is just bet the Warriors to win straight, just outright, and go plus 145 payment. I'm good. That, for me, is the value bet on this game. I agree that I would sooner take Houston by 3.5 than give up the money to get the 1, 2, or 3 point loss protection for Golden State. But so basically I'm agreeing with you that if you're picking a point spread bet, Houston is the one to go with. But I'm saying that I'd rather go with the money line and Golden State in this case. I'd sooner you get the reigning back-to-back NBA champions and they're plus 145 in a game. I don't care who they're playing. That's value.
Plus, they're 3-0 on the road. They beat the Clippers all 3 times in LA. They're not very intimidated by that, it seems.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. So where we're going is prop betting, because prop betting is always fun, which is why we've got the segment Give Me Props. We've picked a handful of prop bets to go over this week, starting with the NFL. 2019 offseason has seen a lot of focus given to the revamp the Cleveland Browns have done. So with all of the hype and their second-round pick, Greedy Williams, declaring the Browns will win the Super Bowl this season, one Vegas casino's odds still favor Cleveland missing the playoffs entirely. The Superbook at Westgate, Las Vegas, has the Browns a minus 120 favorite to miss the playoffs and even money to make the postseason. Online sports books like MyBookie and sportsbetting.ag have the Browns with the best odds to win the AFC North Division. So are you running to the Westgate to bet on Cleveland to make the playoffs this year, or do you think that what do you guys think? Taylor, we'll go to you first.
I'm never running anywhere to bet on the Browns to do something good, so I would not go do that. But I'm kind of intrigued just because the division has a bunch of question marks. We mentioned the Bengals maybe being one of the worst teams in the NFL. The Steelers lost Antonio Brown. They lost Le'Veon Bell. Ben Roethlisberger's not getting any younger. They missed the playoffs last year anyway. And Baltimore has Lamar Jackson, who didn't exactly light the world on fire at the end of last year as the starter, even though they did make the playoffs. And, Cleveland's the hot team right now. They won, I think, 7 games last year, which is a 7-win improvement. So it's hard to fault that. Hard to fault the optimism around that. But I don't know if I can just bring myself to bet on the Browns to do something good. So I get why they're minus 120 to miss the playoffs. I would still consider betting the other side of that. But the safe money is always on Cleveland to fail. So that's I get where they're coming from with that.
I agree 100% with my esteemed colleague, Taylor. I have no confidence in Cleveland making the playoffs until they actually make the playoffs. So until that happens, I can't pick them. Yeah, the Bengals are going to suck this year, and the Ravens got too many question marks with the players they've lost and they haven't replaced. Even though they look like they're going to be a little faster on offense, I'm intrigued to see what Mark Ingram can do at running back and Earl Thomas at safety. I think the Ravens have a chance to win the division if all that comes together. But since it's obviously way too in the offseason to have any kind of idea of if they're even gelling, you have to look at Pittsburgh and Cleveland. And until Cleveland can knock Pittsburgh from winning the division or from going to the playoffs, you have to still side with the Steelers. I know they lost Bell, but they already replaced them last year with that running game. And I know they lost Antonio Brown, but Juju is a great receiver himself. and they have enough other young talent at receiver. Their offensive line was playing better. They added more pieces to the defense. You have to still go with the Steelers to win that division. Cleveland's not making enough. They're not winning the division. They're not even getting a wild card. They're not going to the playoffs.
I am going to have to agree with both of my esteemed colleagues here, Rick and Taylor. I don't know if when you can get an even money bet to bet a team that never makes the playoffs to not make the playoffs. I mean, qualify, and the day that they lock in a playoff spot is the first time I will believe the Browns are going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They could be up 100-0 with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter of a game to move to 12-0 and clinch a playoff spot. And I still would think that but it's the Browns. It is the Browns. So, yeah, I mean, and you brought up a really good point, Rick, because that was what I was going to mention, is that Bell sat out. So they already, he's a guy who they've had a year's experience of replacing. And Juju Smith-Schuster is a very, very good wide receiver. I'm sure that they'll take a step back, perhaps, or at least maybe at the very beginning. But I don't know. It's one of those things where when you see the interactions on social media or through the media that some of these players have been having since Antonio Brown was traded, you don't know if the Steelers might get a boost from subtraction in that case if they actually were feeling that way all of last year as well. It also could just be that they're trying to save face for the organization. There may not have been anything that boiled over until Brown was dealt, but if that was the case, if that played a negative factor, yeah, I mean, the Steelers, I agree, the Ravens could be up there. I also agree the Bengals will not be up there, and it remains to be seen on what side of those other teams the Browns end up falling on. They've certainly made improvements. It'd be interesting to see. I think that the biggest thing going for the Browns is that it might not be a division where you need 10 wins to win it. It might be a division where you need to go 9-7 to win the division, where there is no wild card, even remotely close. There is no wild card team in that division. And if that's the case, to get 2 games of improvement might be possible. But I would not bet on the Browns to make the playoffs until they've shown they can actually make the playoffs. That's really what it comes down to for me. So
sound logic.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's stick with the NFL here. With the draft behind us, we can now really look ahead to betting on the 2019 NFL season using MyBookie as a guide. In the AFC, the New England Patriots, Cleveland Browns, Indianapolis Colts, and Kansas City Chiefs are favored to win their divisions, so the Browns and Colts pay out at +140 and +150 respectively. Which non-favorite is your best bet to win a division? And if it's still the Steelers or the Ravens, obviously understandable for the AFC. Rick, we'll go to you first.
Whoa, that's a tough question right there. Oh, man. I'm going to go – I think – and I hate to say this, but I think the Houston Texans can challenge the Colts for the division. But I'm going with the Chargers. They challenged the Chiefs last year for the division. I think with the problems that they're having with Tyreek Hill and the chance that he could not play is going to hurt that offense greatly because he is their X factor. He can do it all on offense. You have to account for him at all times. If he's not there, that offense is going to be more limited. But with the Chargers, they're adding more pieces. They're getting better. I know Phillip Rivers is getting older. But, they went into New England last year. New England ended up winning the Super Bowl, so you can't fault the Chargers for losing that game. I believe it's going to be the Chargers. I'm taking the Chargers as the non-favorites that you just mentioned to have the best chance of winning the division. In fact, I think they're actually going to win the division. I don't think the Chiefs are winning it this year if Tyreek Hill is suspended.
I mean, I think it's basically what we were just talking about. The AFC North is completely wide open except for the Bengals. You have the Browns as the favorites in spite of us just basically talking them down. So taking Pittsburgh at +175 or Baltimore at +300, those are pretty good odds for those teams if Cleveland falters as we think they might. Houston plus 225. The Colts owned them last year. The Colts look like a team kind of on the rise. Andrew Luck is healthy again, assuming he's still healthy. And anytime he's healthy, that team's going to have a chance. The division's pretty weak as a whole. It could be another division where you only need 9 wins to win it. So Houston at plus 225 is a pretty good value, but if I had to bet on one of these teams, it'd probably be either Baltimore or Pittsburgh, just because if Cleveland's the favorite, that division's probably not a very good one.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Taylor, and then I've been swayed by Rick. There was one other thing to add, and it is not necessarily tangible, but it is the fact that Mahomes is the Madden cover athlete. And you go back 20 years, never works out. Something always happens. And it's, that's not the kind of approach you want to take to why you would place a bet, but it's, as someone who's played the Madden games for, 25 years at this point. But yeah, the Tyreek Hill situation, and it may not just be a suspension. He could end up being cut. Some people, there was an expectation that he may have been cut by the time we're recording this. People thought once those recordings came out that he was gone. That was it. May never play football again. And as we're sitting here, that hasn't been the case yet. But the Chiefs may be vulnerable, and I do think that the best thing that is going for the Chargers being the pick is that you're not trying to pick which of a group of average or mediocre teams is going to be the best of a bunch of average to mediocre teams, like you would be in the North-South divisions, potentially. So I would, I was leaning towards saying Pittsburgh because it's it's still just they're the Steelers, and Baltimore could be up there too. But I'd have to go to the Chargers. I think that the Chiefs might, slide back a bit, and regardless of what the punishment, assuming there is one for Tyreek Hill, is, whether he is done with the organization, suspended, whatever, I do think that that basically makes the Chiefs on-field team lesser than it was a year ago. And I think that's a good pick. So Rick, you swayed me on that one.
Yeah, to put an exclamation point on that, the Chargers went into Kansas City last year and beat them.
There you go. So let's do the same thing for the NFC. The favorites there: Philadelphia at minus 125, New Orleans at minus 175, the Los Angeles Rams at minus 175, and the Bears, Packers, and Vikings are all listed at plus 200. If you're curious, the only other team in the NFC North, the Detroit Lions, come in at plus 1,000. Which non-favorite are you taking to win a division this year in the NFC, or which team are you taking in the bunch in the NFC North, if you want to go that direction, Taylor?
I don't really like any of these underdogs as much as those AFC underdogs we were just talking about. I think we can write off the entire NFC West. I think that's pretty clearly LA and then everybody else. The South, I would hear the same argument, although I think Atlanta and Carolina at least have an outside chance at dethroning New Orleans. So I'm going to go with the East here. I'm going to take Dallas, even though last season, everything about last season for them screams anomaly to me. They started off terribly. They lost to the Titans at home on Monday Night Football. And then they went on this crazy run after that to sneak into the playoffs. But, Philly's a team that was pretty up and down last year. I know they had injuries with Carson Wentz coming back and all that stuff. But Dallas has a pretty sound roster overall. I don't trust their coaching at all either. But plus 175 is a decent price on a team that did make the playoffs last year and did improve as the year went on, especially once they got Amari Cooper from the Raiders. So among these teams that I don't like, I guess I would take the Cowboys, even though I know Rick is going to hate it.
Just to follow up with your point about the NFC South, these teams seem to battle it out and flip-flop who wins the division each year. And I would say this could be the year that Atlanta comes back and takes the division, or at least competes more with the Saints. I'm not as confident as the Saints doing as well this year. They lost Mark Ingram, and I think that's going to hurt them a lot, even though Kamara is a beast and he's going to get more touches. But still, that balance between the two really made that running attack or one of the best in the league. And, the Rams are going to take that division, even though I'm a Seahawks fan and I want to see Seattle do well. Rams are going to run away with that division. So, in the East, I like to say Philly. I used to ride them all the time with Nick Foles. I still think they got a lot of talent and they could take that division, and I'm not even going to talk about Dallas. And Washington and the Giants, they're going to contend for the bottom. You have to go with the North here, the NFC North, with three teams all bunched up at the top. If you, as we used to say, check the tape and go back, I was all in on the Vikings last year to go to the playoffs, to win the division, to contend for the Super Bowl. I thought they had it with getting Kirk Cousins and stuff. A part of me wants to say this could be the year. Cousins, has a whole year under his belt with them. Cook's going to be healthy at running back again. They got an explosive offense. The defense should be better. I don't trust what Green Bay's doing with the new coach, but you have to go with the Bears. You have to go with the Bears here. They put together a great team. Khalil Mack changes the whole dynamic of that defense. They added more pieces on offense. They're going to be more explosive on offense now. I really in a division where defense matters, they probably have not only the best defense in that division, but in the entire conference. So I'm going with the Bears here, taking the Bears to win that division, and I honestly think they're going to contend for a Super Bowl spot. And I don't think there's any. I don't think we can go with any of the underdogs here in these divisions. I think they pretty much got them spot on, except maybe Atlanta in the South, or as Taylor said, Dallas in the East.
I do see what you're saying, but I want to go back to a point that you had brought up when we were trying to figure out who was going to be one of the worst teams in the league, and that is, if you're looking at the NFC North, which team has the best player? Which team has the player that when he's playing – what's that?
Green Bay.
Right. So if you've got three teams that are considered to be on even footing, I'm going with the best player. I agree that with Minnesota that they have the pieces where they seem like they're that team that it's always like, I think this could be their year to step up. I do believe, that they've got a quarterback that could work. They've got a running back that could work. I think that the Bears are a good team. I think that it might be a little bit of an overreach to say that they're going to be contending for a Super Bowl, but I don't disagree that they're a good team. What I'm saying is that if you've got three teams and there is not a dramatic difference between the three, I'm going with who has the best player. And until proven otherwise, the best quarterback in that division, the best player in that division belongs to Green Bay. So I would be taking the Packers plus 200. I think that it's any of the three they've got listed have a legitimate opportunity, and I do think that the long-term ceiling, as far as a deep playoff run, the ceiling might be higher for the teams that are not the Packers. And the Bears or the Vikings, if they do win the division, might have more of a capability of going a little bit farther. I don't, because Minnesota would have to click, and the Bears are the Bears. They're a good team. But as far as winning the division goes, as long as they keep their health, I'm going with the team that has the best player and in that division, and that is Green Bay. No one's picking Detroit, right? Just for the record.
No.
That's a Cleveland thing. I mean, it's like I'm never going to bet on Detroit to actually succeed. So no.
Plus 1,000. I mean, it's there if you want it.
If Barry Sanders comes back, I'm never taking the Lions.
I'll take Cersei at plus 2,500 over the Lions at plus 1,000.
I agree with that, and I haven't caught up enough to fully to be able to back that up with any true knowledge to back it. But yeah, I agree. The Lions would be a sucker's bet. One prop bet from outside the NFL this week. Let's go to the Kentucky Derby. Plenty of prop bets available for this race every year, from the length of the national anthem to who the winning jockey will thank first in their post-race interview, to whether or not Secretariat's record time of 1:59.4 will be broken, And even for this year, whether or not Mark Hamill will tweet, "May the horse be with you," since the race falls on May the 4th. Which prop bet do you find the most interesting, intriguing, or entertaining for the Kentucky Derby, Rick?
Well, it's kind of a twofold answer here, but I don't think they're going to break any records this year, especially with the best or the odds-on favorite horse pulling out, withdrawing from this race or not being available. So I got to go with "May the Horse Be With You," and it does fall on, May 4th. And I've been to the birthplace of where Star Wars was born here in San Anselmo, California. I've stood in the same town, in the same square where George Lucas stood when he was inspired to write Star Wars and Indiana Jones. I'm going to tweet my good buddy Mark Hamill and ask if he can just repeat what I asked him to repeat, and I'm going to make a lot of money off that prop bet.
If you're Mark Hamill, not that Mark Hamill's needing more money, but couldn't you just rig this for yourself? Just tweet it out or go to Vegas, wherever, bet on it, and then tweet it out, and then you win. But that may be a conflict of interest or something. But my favorite, I think, is who will the winning jockey thank first? You have owner, trainer, horse, family, and God at plus 300 each, and other plus 600. It should be the horse probably, because the horse is the one doing the work. He's just sitting up there. But I think trainer and God plus 300 each. Like, everyone thanks God pretty much first whenever they win something, be it an Academy Award, Kentucky Derby, NBA title, whatever. So God at plus 300 is always a player. Trainer plus 300 would be the other favorite. If Bob Baffert's hiring you to ride his horse, then you're probably going to thank Bob Baffert. Horse is interesting as a prop bet there, but I'll probably side with God or trainer plus 300 each.
Can't go wrong with the Lord.
I do want to just say, as a general quote, God at plus 300 is always a player.
Yeah,
that's quite the quote. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love the May the 4th and Revenge of the 5th. And Mark Hamill is on Twitter, on Instagram, is regularly dad joke hilarious. He is a very, very funny follow. And I think that I think what this comes down to is whether or not he watches the Kentucky Derby. Because that is like a dad joke just sitting right there. And if there's a Star Wars cast member who would consider doing it, it's going to be the guy who's also the Joker. It's going to be Mark Hamill. And so if he watches it, that would be great. I think that for me is going to be the most intriguing thing, is to turn on Twitter notifications for him on Twitter just to see, just in the hopes that, he makes the dad joke. As a Star Wars fan, for me to mix that with the Kentucky Derby, that's just awesome. Everyone loves some easy money. So, Rick, what is your easy money lock of the week?
Okay, I'm going to go to Bellator here. They're going to be over in the UK on Saturday. Now, the odds aren't great for the main event with Primus versus Wild, but it should be easy money. In fact, I'm 99.9% guaranteeing Primus is going to win this one. The last I saw, he was a little bit north of minus 350 odds. But Tim Wild, this is his first time fighting in Bellator, and he's fighting in the main event, and he's fighting overseas, and he's fighting against a former champ. For me, everything lines up to point towards Primus winning. But you know what? Crazier things have happened. Primus can go in there, fall on his face, get knocked down in 30 seconds. You never know. That's part of the allure of MMA. But for this, my easy pick, my lock, I'm going with Primus over Wild, Bellator, Birmingham, on Saturday.
Taylor, what's your easy money pick this week?
Mine was going to be Omaha Beach to win the Kentucky Derby, because Mike Smith, the star jockey, before the race had the choice between Roadster, who was basically a co-favorite, and Omaha Beach. He chose Omaha Beach, but Omaha Beach has been scratched. So now Roadster and Game Winner are your plus 400 favorites. I'm going to side with Roadster there with Omaha Beach out. We've seen chalk hold firm at the Derby 3 of the last 4 years with American Pharoah, Nyquist, and then Justify last year. Roadster is the horse with most of the buzz around it right now. So betting the favorite at the Derby seems to be a trend in recent years, so I'll just keep it rolling with Roadster, plus 400.
All right, well, the opposite of doing a lock, it's clear as mud. The game, fight, or event that seems so unpredictable that we're keeping clear away from betting on it at all. Taylor, what's your pick for this week?
I'm going to pretty much stick with what I had last week, which was the entire NHL playoffs. We were on the Islanders last week. They're down 0-3. I do think the Stars, which was my pick, are still interesting moving forward, but in general, not betting on that seems like the way to go, just because from game to game, there's really no telling what's going to happen. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to keep not betting on the NHL playoffs.
Rick?
That's pretty smart there. For me, I'm staying away from the undercard of the Jacobs versus Alvarez big boxing event this weekend. You got the main card fights. We're not talking about the prelim fights or anything like that, but you got two young prospects taking on two veterans. In addition to that, their betting lines are ridiculous. One was minus 6,000. The other one was like minus 3,500. So even if you think one of these young bucks are going to win, which both of them should, you're not going to make any money on it at all, and it's not even worth the risk. Stay away from it.
Well, it's that time of the podcast where I interrupt the work days of everyone within a 50-foot radius of our studio, because it is time for Show Me the Money! Lines, where we look ahead to the weekend's games and events and their current money lines. Huge weekend for boxing. Canelo Alvarez taking on Daniel Jacobs in Las Vegas. Middleweight unification bout. Alvarez listed as a huge favorite at minus 460. Jacobs plus 355. Rick, any chance betting on the underdog is a good move here?
There is a chance, actually. If you're a risk taker, this is one of those opportunities where you can take a risk. Here's why. Jacobs is a champion. He's a great boxer in his own right. He's going up against, in my opinion, the best boxer in the sport right now, Alvarez. Canelo is a beast. He might not have the greatest technical skills in the sport, but he will beat you up. He will maul you in there. He has an incredible resume. His only loss in his career was to that bum, that scum, I like to call Floyd Mayweather Jr. And that's when Floyd was in his prime and Canelo was still a young buck coming up. With that said, this is going to be a great fight. Like, I am fired up for this fight because you got two really solid fighters in there. Jacobs has more athleticism. He has the reach advantage. He has the technical skills, and he has the footwork. If he can keep this fight at a distance, if he can move and keep him moving and not be stationary and not allow Canelo to get in there and beat him up, he has a chance. These odds are pretty large despite the fact that Jacobs has a chance. With that said, I'm still going with Canelo until someone beats him. I'm sticking with him. He just went to war twice with Triple G, who's one of the best fighters in the sport, came out winning both of them, or split one the other. Jacobs lost to Triple G when he fought him. I'm going with Canelo here, but the risk takers out there, you have a chance here.
Canelo is one of the few boxers I have heard of, so I'm just going to side with the odds at minus 460 and say he's a pretty good lock to win. Anything can happen. He could just take one punch to the face and be dead. Well, not dead, but dead and as far as the fight goes. But, plus 355 is out. Yeah, knocked out.
We're dead.
Hopefully not dead. That would be very traumatic.
That would be very upsetting if an upset ended that way.
Imagine if you bet on him and he died. Like, that would be extra traumatic. But
we're going down a weird path here.
Just bet on Canelo. Well, don't bet on it because minus 460, you're not even winning money there. So I would just avoid it.
Avoid it.
Biggest fight of the year.
Well, you're going to bet on minus 460. You're not going to make any money on it.
True.
All right, so let's stick with combat sports. The line here is a little bit better. UFC in Ottawa on Saturday night, headlined by a bout between Cowboy Donald Cerrone and Al Iaquinta. Iaquinta is listed at the favorite at -120, Cowboy -110. So neither of these are paying out better than even money or even at even money. Rick, who do you have in UFC's headline bout for this weekend?
Oh my goodness. I'm just as excited for this fight as I am the Jacobs Alvarez fight. I'm a huge fan of Cerrone. He's incredible. He fights anybody and everybody. He fights all the time. He's taken on everybody in the sport if you look over his fight record. Raging Al is a beast inside the cage, but the problem is when he gets down on the ground, when he gets down to the mat, Khabib beat him up last year on the mat, just controlled the fight, dictated it all. He has 3 submission losses. That's not a coincidence. Okay, that means he has some kind of deficiency when he gets down on the ground. Cerrone has 17, I think it was, submission victories in his career out of 35. Not bad. I love the Cowboy. That is why I'm taking him to win, besides the fact that I'm kind of biased towards him. The odds are great. Whoever you pick in this fight, this is what's great. Whoever you pick, you got a great return coming. You got solid betting value on this, on both fighters. For me, I go with the Cowboy because he's one of my favorite fighters. Now that Brock Lesnar's not there anymore and Uriah Faber's retired, and because he's actually more competent on the ground than I believe Raging Al is. So give me the Cowboy. Cowboy up.
When you have odds like this that are pretty much the same, I'm always going to lean toward the guy with slightly better value, which is Cowboy here. I'm also going to lean toward the fighter with the good nickname, and that's Cowboy here. I'm not aware of any Al.
Versus Raging Al?
I think Cowboy is a better nickname than Raging Al. Al's not really an intimidating name. It's like Raging Al Bundy. Like, I'm not scared.
Hey, Raging Al Bundy scored 4 touchdowns in a game for Polk, okay?
Number 33, baby.
That's right. He's like a Hall of Famer. He's a legend.
I did not mean to step into that bear trap. But, Cowboy -110, Rick's my leader with, as far as combat sports goes, so I'll follow suit.
All right. Well, we are going to go to the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. We did say with the money line, we're going to steer away from that. It's always clear as mud, but we are going to have to do some picks here because we have to have some content for next week's whoops. So 2 games being played Friday night. First off, game 4 between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Islanders, which we'll be talking about the first 3 games a little bit later on, or at least I will. As was the case with Wednesday's game 3, which the Hurricanes won. The Canes enter as the favorites. Carolina at -135, New York at +122. Taylor, does Carolina end the series in game 4, or do the Islanders pay out on that +122?
It's been a close series despite the lopsided 3-0 score here, and New York's at home, right?
No, it's in Raleigh.
Oh, it's in Raleigh. Okay, well, I was going to pick the Islanders there because I guess I was wrong about who was at home, but back up against the wall, the Islanders are a team I was picking before the series. They're pretty unlikely to actually win the series at this point, but +122, back against the wall, win or go home. I'll just pick New York to extend the series, even though they're likely done in the long run.
The Browns have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl than the Islanders coming back in this series. They've looked pathetic. The scores might be close, but the Islanders have looked pathetic. If they were at home, I would have picked them to win. But for Carolina to get a chance to close it out now, get some rest, get ready for the next round, I got to go with Carolina. They've been the hotter team. They've been, they eliminated Washington. Now they can eliminate the Islanders. I'm going Carolina here. Take it at home tonight. Sweep. Get the brooms out. Goodbye, Islanders. Whoops.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. Whoops. I go a bit back and forth because I do see it on both sides. It's one of those things where I think that if the Islanders were to be able to win game 4, that they would win game 5 and then lose in 6. It's hard for me to believe that they would be able to win 2 games at this point, just with the way that Carolina has played. So I'm leaning towards Carolina just ending it in 4 and putting both the Islanders and myself out of our miseries when it comes to that. But I do see the argument to be made. It's that back against the wall. If they were anything like the team that took down the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round, then, but Carolina, the more games they play, the more they seem like a team of destiny. So I would just take the bunch of jerks to close it out, and win it in 4, because if they don't, I think they win it in 6. In the Western Conference matchup, St. Louis is visiting Dallas. Wednesday's game ended with the Stars picking up a 4-2 win to even the series. For Game 5, the Blues, the favorites at -141. They will be at home. Stars, underdogs at +128. Which team takes control of this series to take that 3-2 series edge with a win in Game 5, Taylor?
I've been driving the Stars bandwagon since we've been doing this show. They're pretty evenly matched. They're both teams that went on hot runs second half of the season. Hot goaltenders on each side. There have been more goals in this series than I would have expected, I think, but +128 is pretty decent value on Dallas. They are clearly not intimidated by going on the road. They went into Nashville, picked up a couple wins in the last round. They've already won a game in this series in St. Louis. So it's a close series. I think it easily could go 7. That's not exactly a hot take, but I'll just side with the value, and the value's on Dallas. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, like I said before, I'll never pick a Dallas team, so I'm not taking Dallas here. But I will say I'm a bit surprised at how tough they've played this series. They've been able to answer the bell every time St. Louis seems to get the advantage. But St. Louis returning home, Game 5, you have to like their chances of winning at home, take the lead in this series. And I'm going with St. Louis.
Yeah, I think the Blues get back in the win column. Dallas had the win to even the series in Dallas in Game 4, but going home, coming off of a loss, for me, that would scream that St. Louis, the Blues, would be in line to pick up a bounce-back win because they are a very good team. Dallas is obviously too. But I think that that's just kind of the way it goes, and then Dallas either forces a Game 7 in Dallas or St. Louis wins it in 6. I think that's just kind of the way this is going to go. We are at that time of the podcast for my favorite segment, maybe not as much this week, and that's what we're just calling Whoops. This is our chance to come clean about something we projected, predicted, or pushed that we were really wrong about, and to explain ourselves. So I'm going to go first to get us going here. I'm going to go back to that Islanders-Hurricane series. It's still technically a conditional whoops because the series is not over, but it's a 3-0 series. It's over. This is the Hurricanes, as I said moments ago. I think the more that they play, the more I see them play, the more they just feel like a team of destiny. And I am really hoping, because of just how random it would be, to see a Carolina-Columbus Eastern Conference final. Because that would feel like what happens if you simulate 5 seasons of NHL 19 and you get to that point where, like, the Blue Jackets acquired, like, Carey Price for, like, a 3rd-round pick, and Carolina, like, signed Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves somehow. But that just kind of feels like what that kind of a matchup feels like is years down the line of a video game simulation. But I thought Barry Trotz was going to be the difference maker, and these have all been close games. It was a 1-0 overtime loss for the Islanders in Game 1, a 2-1 loss in Game 2, and then it was a 3-2 game until the Islanders pulled their goalie and gave up 2 empty net goals in Game 3. And the fact that Carolina's been that team to put the game away or to hold off the Islanders, I was wrong about, especially when in Game 2, both of Carolina's goals came in the 3rd period. It was an Islander lead that Carolina tied the game, and I think it was only like 2 minutes later took the lead and then held off the Islander attack for the rest of the game. So, me picking the Islanders to beat the Hurricanes because I thought Barry Trotz was going to be the difference is a definite whoops. Conditional, but definite. So, Rick, what's your whoops of the week this week?
There's nothing conditional about it. Your whoops makes our whoops look like nothing.
That's why I lead in. I make you guys look good.
Yeah, you got to make us look good. Okay, so, we were at Talladega last weekend for NASCAR, and my top 5 drivers didn't turn out too well. Now, I don't want to, like, beat myself up too much because this is Talladega. And this is one of those tracks where it's hard to predict because you always have the big wrecks at the end. And they were doing a new restrictor plate package. So we didn't know how fast they could go. They could have gone like 1,000 miles per hour. We weren't sure. With that said, the top 5 results, I only got one guy right. And that was my pick to win, Joey Logano. He finished 4th. The other 4 guys I didn't even have on the radar. 2 of them haven't finished in the top 5 in years. The guy who won it, Chase Elliott, he's a good young driver. He's one of the young stars coming up. But my other guys that I picked, Keselowski, Hamlin, Boyer, Stenhouse, they were nowhere to be found at the end. Whoops.
All right, Taylor, come clean. What do you got for us?
Mine's also a conditional whoops because they're not officially dead yet, but I picked the Rockets to win the series against Golden State. I was very confident in that pick, which looks downright shameful now. But it's only 2-0. They're coming home. They could easily even the series. It's not impossible, but Golden State seems pretty likely to advance because they're Golden State. Kevin Durant's on another planet right now. The Rockets no one can guard him. He's 7 feet tall. He can just shoot over anyone. And he's basically shooting like Steph Curry in this series. So I'm not sure what they can do to stop him. I don't know what anyone can do to stop him. So it's not a sure thing yet, but oops on the Rockets so far. Next week, my oops may be the Bucks. So we'll see.
Well, we're about to close the window here, so one last chance to get some things in. Closing line is set. We're looking for some final thoughts. Taylor, what do you got?
So I obviously like Roadster as the favorite to win the Kentucky Derby, but if you're looking for a horse with longer odds that still has a good chance, I like Tacitus at plus 600. This was the horse that accrued more qualifying points than any other horse in the field. I don't know why it's being undervalued like this, but Roadster and Game Winner are the odds-on favorites right now. But if you want a little bit more value, then Tacitus at plus 600 seems decent. So I wouldn't mind that.
Rick, go for your closing line. Take us home strong.
I'd like to kind of summarize what happened today. When we were in agreement, it's because you guys were all following the pace that I had set. I was the pace car right for that. And I really like seeing this, teamwork, this bonding here when you guys agree with me. Second of all, I like to say I told you so with the Celtics, Avoid the Browns at all costs. Cersei is hot, and NASCAR is going to be back in Dover this weekend. And we got a great weekend full of fights this weekend to watch. It's going to be exciting.
May the horse be with you.
May the horse be with you.
And you as well. That'll do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. Check out gamblingsites.org for plenty more from these guys here. They've been Taylor Smith and Rick Rockwell. I'm Drew Goldfarb. We will see you next time, and may the horse be with you.